Good evening and welcome to the Pompey Politics Podcast.
I'm Ian Tiny Morris.
And I'm Simon Sansbury.
Well, it's Wednesday night, so you could argue that we are either 3 days late or 4 days early. And a few minutes as well, just off of the pace. And I need to check that Simon is in fact there, because at the moment all I can hear is myself coming back. Are you there, Simon?
I am indeed here. Sorry for that one. Our apologies. Yes, that was indeed for a show about predictions. That wasn't something we predicted. But
No.
yes.
So in what is becoming a bit of an annual tradition, it's time for us to flop out our crystal balls, as it were, and gaze into the future of tomorrow and see whether this year mine are working better than yours. Because I think you've won the last three, have you not?
I believe so. Yes, I can't honestly remember. Did we do predictions in the first year? Because we started on something like the 16th of April, so I can't remember. I think we did predictions because we were ahead of the election, obviously. But yeah, so far I've been luckier than you have, shall we say?
Yes, indeed. So, our busiest year for hustings this year, Simon. We got half the wards in Portsmouth across the line, which sets us up beautifully for all 14 next year, does it not?
It does. Hopefully they'll be a little bit easier to organise, and we won't be fraught with as many technical issues. But if we can have technical issues tonight rather than tomorrow night, that will be a bit less stressful, I guess. So yes, a whole 7 wards. It was nearly 8, but unfortunately, despite having 2 very interested candidates among the I can't remember if it's 5 or 6 in Milton, among the candidates that there are in Milton, unfortunately we just couldn't get them to settle on a date, and we just ran out of time. So our apologies to them and to the voters of Milton that we weren't able to secure a hustings for them. But yeah, the 7 that we did, very good. We some great exchanges from all the candidates that took part, and our thanks to those that came back to us and took part, or indeed those that said that they couldn't make it and provided some opening and closing speeches, which I read, hopefully to some sort of to their pleasure, I hope.
Oh yeah, and to be fair, I think the other thing is the biggest array of parties ever. We had Lib Dems, Labour, Conservative, Portsmouth Independent Party, an independent, a Green, and Reform UK. I think that's another record, isn't it?
We certainly had more parties involved, and this wasn't in one hustings, by the way. But we had more.
No.
We had more parties involved this year than we've had before. Yes, so we had our first candidates from Reform UK taking part, and I think Cal standing as an independent was the first.
Yeah, definitely.
No, hang on, because is my memory betraying me? Didn't Jeanette Smith take part last year? I can't remember. I have trouble remembering yesterday. Sorry, Jeanette.
No worry. So yes, but yeah, no, a good hustings, and never one to rest on our laurels. We another 2 shows this week. The prediction show tonight, and then tomorrow, for those of you who have a late night yearning, somehow we've managed to blag our way into the count with our press-based credentials.
Well, yeah, our entirely please can we come in approach, and the council, bless them, were very amenable. So yeah, so we will be there, probably caffeined up to our eyeballs, making our way through the highs and lows of the count, and negotiating the fun that is. So it's our first outside broadcast, as it were. We've never done anything that hasn't either been a live stream from the internet, and indeed our first live stream was on the 31st of January 2021 as the UK left the EU at 11 o'clock at night. So a similar sort of timing, hopefully to different levels of results and interest. But yeah, everything else has been done from Pompey Politics Podcast Central, aka my front room. So yeah, it'll be an interesting evening. So if you are a candidate or a campaigner that's at the count tomorrow, please do feel free to stop by if you'd like to say hi and give us your thoughts as the evening progresses. So yeah, that's going to be an interesting one. So our predictions.
Yes, 14 wards up for grabs, as always, with our strange 42 being the answer to the universe, split into 3 chunks of 14. And so, who's got their political futures on the line tomorrow? Then, Simon, with 14 wards, who's out in terms of our parties?
So do you mean by which do you mean the which parties have candidates that are up for a re-election?
Yes,
Right, sorry.
yes,
So I beg your pardon. So yeah, so of the 14 wards up for election, 6 of them are current Liberal Democrat candidates, 6 of them are current Conservative candidates, and 2 of them are currently Labour candidates, although one of those so this is in comparison to who was returned in 2019. So
yes.
Charles Dickens, as we'd covered in the Charles Dickens hustings, and indeed our special interview with Cal Corkery, as everybody I'm sure in Portsmouth knows by now, is standing as an independent. So yeah, that's kind of a one to watch. So yeah, 6 and 2. We'll kind of see how that goes and how that leaves the format of the council. In order to have overall control, any political party needs to reach a total of 22 sitting councillors. We haven't had overall control in the city for quite some time now, but we've had a minority administration in the form of the Liberal Democrats that's been able to get its business done with support from other parties. So it's yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. Will it result in any party getting an overall control?
No, not a
Can't see
chance in hell.
not a chance. You know, we can add up.
Yep,
It's not going to happen.
yep.
So
No, there is more chance tomorrow of us being mistaken for Thelma and Louise than there is of any party gaining overall control. Because I think to get across the line, I think roughly one party would have to win. I think the Conservatives or the Lib Dems would have to win something like 12 of the 14 seats, and I think for either Labour or the Portsmouth Independents, I think if they win all 14, which don't get me wrong, will be a great night for all of them, but it isn't going to take them past the magic 22.
No, so the current standing of the council is that there's 17 Liberal Democrats, 13 Conservatives, 8 councillors sitting as Labour councillors, 1 independent. Well, sorry, actually, no, that's no, sorry, 7 Labour, then 2 independents. Hang on, I've done my numbers wrong, haven't I? So
Well,
yeah, so so the independents are in the form of Judith Smythe is currently sitting out with of the Labour group under a suspension, and as we talked about earlier, Cal is sitting as an independent, and then we've got the Portsmouth Independence Party with its 3 councillors. So that,
Kirsty's an independent as well.
oh, that's where oh god, how did I manage to bugger that up? I'm completely on my numbers. Sorry, guys. So yeah, so there'll be some interesting things to watch. So there'll be a slew of independents. We'll see kind of what happens, but kind of we've got a handy image that we've borrowed with Tim's permission from Tim Owens that shows us basically who all the candidates are, and I'll share that in the chat in a minute. So that's kind of really handy for us to kind of see, and it also shows us who the incumbent, sorry, which party the was elected in 2019. So yeah, a selection of candidates across the wards. But also one of the things that we did take a look at was about the vote share by political party. So when you look back through the years, so the earliest date that we've got um, on um, on on record at the moment at the council, because they only kind of keep them up there on the internet for a certain amount of time, goes back to 2014. But yeah, overall the kind of there's been a kind of overall a peak and trough kind of vote share from the Conservatives, a slowly an incline overall trend from the Liberal Democrats, but I think a sharper incline overall from Labour over time. But also back in 2014, we had quite a few UKIP councillors, and their vote share literally disappeared. And then of course the most recent sorry, don't forget the Greens. Their vote share is um, saw a bit of an increase. Sorry, the number of votes saw a bit of an increase in 2015. But after that, roughly kind of, I think there's a shallow incline kind of over the course there. But of course, the most recent story would be Portsmouth Independence, of literally coming out of nowhere in the last couple of years to have now, as we said, 3 councillors.
Yeah, and I think the interesting challenge, when we look at and we'll get onto different wards in a minute, is one of the challenges when you look at the vote share as an overall. I mean, we've spoken in the past about the fact, there is no PR, and historically there have been some wards, particularly in the north of the city, where the vote share for the Conservatives have been considerable, whereas I think as you move south, um, there aren't as many wards where I would say you see, vote shares over the 50% mark. So, it can be a little bit misleading when we look at the Portsmouth as a whole, because as we've discussed on the podcast over the last 3 years, probably it must be one of the very few cities in the whole of the country that returns a Conservative MP, a Labour MP, and the council's run by the Lib Dems. So, does that mean we're balanced or confused? I'm never quite certain.
Or it might just mean that the people of Portsmouth figure out that maybe they've got a different decision that they land on when it comes to what they want done locally and what they want done nationally. It's an interesting thing. We've talked before on the show, and quite often with guests, about the difference between voting for a particular party, or indeed voting for a particular candidate. Some people are loyal to one or the other or both, and some people are more loyal to the person rather than the party. And indeed, you see that because over the years we've seen several people kind of swap from one party to the other. So yeah, Portsmouth is an interesting electoral map in that respect. It's often referred to as a northern town on the south coast, but its electoral success is perhaps a conundrum, but a happy result for some parties over others, perhaps, depending on how you kind of lean and how you interpret that.
Exactly. So in terms of moving to the predictions,
Yes.
we just to understand the way we're going to do it this evening, just to tidy things up a bit, is rather than historically, we've started at Baffin's and finished at St Thomas, whereas this year we've both independently worked on our predictions, and we thought this year we'd start with safest in terms of the results we were each most certain of,
Hmm.
going down to the wards where we think there is most jeopardiousness.
Is that
I
even a
think
word?
that's a word. I don't think it's a word. No,
Is not.
where perhaps the result is in more jeopardy and things are a bit closer. So we'll go turn and turn about.
Okay.
So without throwing a coin in the air and you pretending it's you, um, I called, and on my imaginary coin I called heads, and it was heads. So I'm going to start.
Okay. Start of 10.
So top of my list, number one result I am most certain of:
Okay.
Paulsgrove.
Okay. So you're most certain of Paulsgrove. My ward that I'm most certain of is Drayton and Farlington.
Interesting. So I've gone for Paulsgrove as an Portsmouth Independence gain.
Okay.
What have you got? Have you got where does Paulsgrove sit on your list?
On my list, Paulsgrove isn't actually that far behind. I've got Paulsgrove as the 12th, so the third most confident.
Are you
Or
number three?
yes, so it's the yeah. So I've kind of ordered them as in most confident, as in the highest number. So we, you know, trust us to between two people, we figured out two different ways to measure this. Paulsgrove is my is my third, but I think there's I don't think there's much between the ones at the top for me, to be honest
No,
with you. So Paulsgrove, you were saying that you reckon that's
Pip
going
game.
pitwards. Um, I would also agree that Paulsgrove is going towards Pip, and indeed, I was just. Do we want to discuss it in more detail, or are we?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess the rationale behind it, for me, if we look at Paulsgrove historically, it was a Labour ward. Then the Conservatives took over, had years of almost winning it unopposed, pretty much on the Port Solent vote. George Madgwick, the father of Portsmouth Independence Party, um, turned the whole world upside down um, the year before last. His dad won last year, and I think it was part of George's thinking was that Paulsgrove had been neglected by the major political parties, and he sought to change that. And I think he's won in some way and lost in others, as I think perhaps the major parties are concentrating their efforts elsewhere and giving Pip a clear run on this one.
I mean, I got nothing really to kind of contribute to that reasoning. I think it's quite clear that the other parties have, to be, let's be really honest with you. There have only been two parties doing any campaigning in Paulsgrove for the last 3 or 4 years, and that's been Portsmouth Independence Party and latterly the Conservatives. But I don't think even they seem to have done much in campaigning in Paulsgrove this year, because they're also they're defending six wards. So you've got to kind of make choices about where you put your resources in order to kind of deliver the result that you need. And it's not about percentage. It's all about getting one more vote than the next person. So, that's kind of where it is. And just to kind of list out the candidates in Paulsgrove this year. So we've got Catherine Cole for the Liberal Democrats, Chris Dyke for Portsmouth Independence Party, Charlie Douglas for the Conservatives, and Eloise Hadnam for the Labour Party. But yeah, we're both predicting a Pip win in Paulsgrove.
Charlie Douglas, an old friend of the pod,
Indeed.
which is nice to hear. So your top pick though was Drayton and Farlington.
Yes.
Who have you got winning that, and why?
So DNF, it comically referred to as the ward where pretty much the Conservatives weigh their vote share rather than count it. Obviously, the council do actually count the votes, just to clarify. Yeah, I've got that as a conservative hold, with Hannah Hockaday being returned as the new Conservative councillor for Drayton and Farlington, having been voted out from Cosham the year before. So so I think that's an easy Conservative win. What are you thinking?
I had that as number 2 on my list. And again, I was pretty confident the Cons would take that. So we've knocked off your 1 and your 3 and my 1 and my 2. So I guess the question is,
have we possibly made this more complicated than we needed to?
No, I don't think so. I think it makes sense. So the question is, who was your second most confident? Who's on your list then?
So the ward I'm second most confident about is Charles Dickens.
Ooh. 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 What are you saying?
I think that's I think that's easily going to be an independent win for Cal.
that is very interesting because on my list it's number 3, and I've got Cow Romping Home as well. So our top 3 are the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is
Slightly in slightly different order. This is not like us to agree so much.
it's unnerving. There's been no collusion. No, I think at the end of the day, Cal is a hard-working local councillor. Um, I've never been the greatest fan of his politics, but for his work ethic and the things that he does for Charles Dickens, Christ, I think even I'd hold my nose and vote for him. So we'll agree on that one. Um, have you got the list up of for Charles Dickens? There are hundreds of them to vote for.
Yes. So, so I've just got that on screen. So, so Charles Dickens, we've got the candidates this year are Yahya Chowdhury for the Liberal Democrats, Cal Corkery is an independent, Raj Ghosh for the Labour Party, Terry Henderson for the Conservative Party, and Ian McCulloch for the Green Party. That being a ward that we held a hustings for, if anybody wants to go and see the hustings of that ward, which had Yahya and Cal taking part, then please do pop along. I shall try and pop the link to it in the chat, but you can see that from either our YouTube presence or from our Facebook page. You'll be able to see that, or indeed listen to it. If you don't want to look at people and just listen to them, you can listen to it wherever you get your podcasts.
Marvelous. So next on my list, number 4 in the slot, and we've had one Conservative, we've had one Independent, one PIP. So my 4th choice is Nelson, and I'm calling that a resounding win for the Liberal Democrats, and returning the ultimate Lib Dem pavement pounder. Lee Hunt gets back in. Number 4 on my list.
So interestingly, in my numbers I've got that as number 10, which would make it 4, and that's also Nelson. So
I'll make it 5, but yes, we are close enough for Jazz. So we're gonna get Lee Hunt.
Sorry,
Yep.
my 11 I had St Tom's. Nelson, and literally without doing them all as ties, I can't see there being any serious risk to Lee being returned in Nelson by the good folks of Nelson.
So you let slip then your 4th choice, St Tom's. What are you saying is going to happen in St Tom's?
So in St Tom's, I'm confident that that Chris Atwell will be returned for the Lib Dems.
Now, I have got St Tom's down at number 6, so we're not too far away. We're a couple out, and I have got that down as another Lib Dem hold.
Okay. I just wanted to kind of make sure we didn't skip listing the candidates on. So we talked about Nelson there, so I'm just going to get that up quickly.
Sorry.
And turn to St Tom's. So good old Nelson. So the candidates there are Nicholas Doyle for the Trade Union Socialist Coalition, Robin Head for the Labour Party, Lee Hunt for the Liberal Democrats, Duncan Robinson for the Green Party, Kerry Ann Swan for the Conservatives, and Henry Thorpe for Portsmouth Independence Party. I see that as another comfortable win for Lee and his relentless pavement pounding.
And another one that one was the Duncan and Lee took part in the hustings there, and so if you want the Lib Dem and the Green perspective, look that one up online.
Indeed.
And so who have we got in St Tom's?
So in St Tom's, so let me just get that one up for us. So St Tom's, used to be a bit of a three-way battle, to be honest with you. But of late, the Lib Dems seem to just be kind of maintaining their lead, with the Conservatives and Labour pretty much kind of fighting it out for duking it out for the second place. But both kind of reducing their overall kind of vote, I think, over the last couple of years. So so Chris Atwell, the Liberal Democrat candidate, Edward Batterby, the Labour candidate, Elliot Lee for the Greens, who had also said that he'd wanted to do a hustings, but unfortunately we couldn't get any
Couldn't find
confirmation
him a
from
friend, could we? Nope.
someone else to take part. So thank you for wanting to do that, Elliot. And I think that was the same last year. So our apologies, Elliot. One year we will get you being able to take part. George Wiles for the Portsmouth Independence Party and Paul Sweeney for the Conservatives. So those are your candidates in St Thomas.
Yeah. So we're agreeing on, well, so far we're top six, and we've agreed on 5 of them. So the other one that makes up my top 6, which was in my slot for number 5, is St Jude.
Okay. Yes, St Jude. I've got that. I've got that as 9 in my scale. So
which is 6 in my. So our top 6, we've 1, 2, 3 slightly different order, 4, 5, 6 slightly different order, but we have got, I'm presuming, and unless something's gone hideously wrong, we're both agreeing that Graham Heaney of Labour gets to keep his seat.
I think over the last few years, there's sporadic kind of highs and lows of the Lib Dem vote share, but Labour took Labour have won it with Graham, obviously, back in 2019. They won it in sorry, I can't even read my own see my own graph. So last year they won it. The year before, the Lib Dems won it. The year before that, Labour won it. The year before that, Labour won it. The year before that, Lib Dems. The year before that, the Conservatives, and the year before, and 2014 was the Conservatives. So it seems to have kind of swapped from being a Conservative ward into a fight out between Lib Dem and Labour, but Labour seem to be taking the higher pegging in the order of things in that ward. So I see that as a return for Graham Heaney, with David Chandler for the Conservatives, Graham for Labour, Harry Melinda for the Greens, Martin Northern for the Lib Dems, and Richard Peckham for the Portsmouth Independence Party. And again, with the hustings there, we had Graham and we had Martin and Richard in the St Jude hustings. So please do stop by that, either on our website, Facebook, YouTube, or listen to it wherever you get your podcasts, if you'd like to hear what those candidates have got to say.
Excellent. So we've agreed on the top 6 safe ones. So who is your 7th? Which, into trying to reverse the numbers using your rather strange and antiquated system,
It'd still be 7.
that will be. No, I think it's number 8.
Okay, if you say so. Number 8, I've gone for Fratton.
Fratton.
Yes.
Well, interesting. The lovely Dave Ashmore.
Indeed.
So you've got him in at number 7 as the 7th safest seat to be returned, and we agree. I also have the lovely Dave Ashmore in to retain his seat in Fratton.
I think it's been quite a close run thing over the last couple of years, with the Labour Party and the Lib Dems essentially kind of trading blows and returning councillors in different years. But yeah, I see the people of Fratton wanting a bit more of Ashmore, and therefore voting for him for another term. So last year, Tom Coles was returned for Labour. the year before that, Stuart Brown for the Liberal Democrats, and in 2019, obviously Dave Ashmore was returned again. But it seems to be a bit of a fight. If you go back quite a way, it was a ward that had in 2014. It returned a UKIP councillor.
Yep.
So there's been kind of a bit of a battle. I mean, in 2015, there were 7 candidates on the ballot paper, whereas this time the folks they're just going to have to put up with 6.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I throw into the mix on this one, which is why it might have looked closer on paper, but I moved it higher up my list. Um, I think I've got to give a shout out of respect to Jacob Short in Fratton, who is a young man in moving into politics, and he really has, you know, in terms of a man who's worked jolly hard on the campaign trail. He really has worked hard, but I think there is that element of I tend to see I tend to see Pip more taking votes off of Conservatives and perhaps a little bit more off of Labour than they will off of the Lib Dems. So hence, I'm confident Dave Ashmore is going to get home and hosed.
Yes. So the candidates this year in Fratton are Samet Alves for the Green Party, Dave Ashmore for the Liberal Democrats, Amy Louise Guider for Labour, who stood last year in Nelson and took part in last year's Nelson hustings, Chris Pickett for the Trade Union and Socialist Coalition, Peter Ross for the Conservatives, and as you said, Jacob Short for PIP. So yeah, I think it's a type one. I think it's a hard fought one, but I think I don't, I see that as being a return for a return of more Ashmore.
So we've done the top half. This is now where I think we'll start to get a little bit wobblier. So my number 8 on the list. I've gone hometown here, and I'm confident in Cosham.
You're confident in Cosham. So on my reckoning, that would make 7. Because I've just done it weirdly. And I've got Copner.
Oh, you got Copner. So let's go. Where have I got Copner? I've got Copner somewhere.
Hope so.
Oh, it's the next one. So we're pretty much there. We are very close again. Cosham. I mean, I've looked at Cosham obviously last year. Asghar Shah turning over, what would be seen to be a very strong conservative ward. I think Asghar works really hard, very visible presence, really strong local brand, and I think that carried him home last time. Lee Mason, ex-Lord Mayor, I think I don't see Labour as active this year as they were last year, and I just don't think Mary perhaps has the same personal brand in Cosham that Asghar had. So I'm going for a Conservative hold.
I agree. I think that I agree. I think Lee's going to have a tougher time of it than he did in 2019. But yeah, I do think that he's still gonna make it over the line with a much slimmer majority. So I think it's going to be closer, but I do think that we're still going to be returning a Conservative in Cosham.
Well, in 2019 was like a who's who, wasn't it? Looking back at it, fond memories. There was George Madgett was there, and Yahya Chowdhury was standing in Charles Dickens, and one fresh-faced, exuberant political youth, one Simon Sansbury stood in Cosham back in the heady days of 2019.
Yeah, I mean, but also 2019 was a by-election. Because a previous councillor had resigned, so the last year of their term was actually up for election. So everyone in Cosham that year was entitled to actually mark 2 people on the ballot paper, not something that everybody got. got the idea of. But nonetheless, the returned candidates that year with the first and second highest number of votes were indeed Lee Mason and Matthew Atkins. So yeah, it's until Shah broke the mold. Since about 2012, it's been a bit of a Tory stronghold, Cosham. So we'll see how it runs. Whether enough of the Tory vote's going to stay home, perhaps tomorrow. Will that be enough to and then any other campaign? We'll see what the good voters of Cosham have decided. But yeah, I agree with you. I do think that Lee's going to win it.
Marvellous. So talk to me about Copner.
Copner. So sorry, I find it hard to say that without entering into some sort of faux Cockney. I didn't do the candidates
No, you
for
did not.
So Cosham candidates: David Fuller for the Liberal Democrats, Lee Mason for the Conservative Party, Tom Olds. Oh, sorry, I've listed him there as a Portsmouth Independence Party, and that will be the case on the ballot paper. But I understood that he's since parted ways with the Portsmouth Independence Party. And Mary Vallely for the Labour Party, and Veronica Wagner for the National Health Action Party. So those are the candidates in Cosham. Obviously, you takes your ballot paper and makes your choices. But Copner,
yeah.
Yeah. So I think so. Last year it was quite an interesting thing. I think there was a close on battle between Portsmouth Independence Party candidate Raymond Dent and the Conservatives, with the Conservatives narrowly, very very narrowly, still winning that over. Are Pip going to pip them at the post this year, or is there going to be a Conservative win? So I think it's going to be a tough fight.
Yep.
But I do think that, and again, Spencer Gardner, the Conservative candidate, was also on the Nelson hustings last year with us, yeah, I think that's going to be a Conservative hold.
And we agree. And obviously, there's what we are seeing is quite a number of councillors who are stepping down this year. And Rob New is the incumbent at the moment, and he's stepping aside. So again, I've got exactly the same dynamic that you have. I think it will be. I don't think it'll be as tight as it was last year. And I've got Conservatives 1 and Pip at 2. So right. Who's
so the sorry.
Yep.
The candidates in Copner.
Yep.
So we've got Arif Chowdhury for the Labour Party, Raymond Dent for Portsmouth Independence Party, Nicky Dodd for the Liberal Democrats, Spencer Gardner for the Conservatives, and Ben Warner for the Greens. Yeah, Copner was again another ward that we were unfortunately unable to schedule in a hustings this year. It was just one where quite early on, we just couldn't get the dates to work. So our apologies to voters in Copner and to the candidates that had come forward.
Right, we are now down to the last 5.
I feel like there should be some sort of drum roll.
Some sort of drum roll. Who's next on your list for confidence?
So hang on. So
number
numbers
5
wise,
on your list.
Is it 5? So I had Copner as my number 7. Shouldn't I be at my number 6?
Oh, if you've got a number 6.
Yeah. Oh, mind you, that was Cosham, so we've already talked about Cosham. So it would be my number 5. You're quite right.
I'm doing better than you are, and you've got the bloody spreadsheet in front of you, man. You're number 5. Here we go.
All right. See what I have to put up with these picks all the time. Despite me pulling what little hair I had out in order to get us live again. So my number 5's alive. I've got that as Hilsey.
Hilsey, we agree.
Haha.
Now, but do we agree on the result? Therein lies the question.
So last year, Hilsey was the shock of the night, with seismic shock, with Frank Jonas being beaten by Russell Simpson from Portsmouth Independence. So will the Portsmouth Independence repeat repeat that magic this year, and oust Scott Pater Harris. Scott Pater Harris and Mariam Daniel, the Labour candidate, both took part in the Hillsey hustings on Sunday. So go look that one up if you want to go and have a listen to what they said. I still think this is a good fight, but I don't think lightning's going to strike in the same place twice. I think that Scott's gonna win this.
And again, I see this one very much as, and it's interesting. We talk about parties and personalities, and often the local elections are very much about sometimes people over parties. And if I look at last year, it, whilst it came as a shock, I think if you looked at it, Frank Jonas is quite a, whilst was well respected, was quite a low key character. And I think Russell, very well known in the area, very strong personal brand, as well as the kind of, a real big positive energy behind, Pip's message of an alternative to, tired party politics. I think this year, I think we're in a situation where, Scott is a very, is a very visible all year round presence in Hillsey. Interesting that when we didn't even put the call out for the hustings, and Scott, I can't remember whether he actually put his hand up on the day or the day after, but I
Yeah, I don't think the ballot boxes were even cold
no,
by the time he'd actually
he
said,
put me down
"I'll do next year."
for
Yeah.
next year. So I think with Scott's strong personal brand, no disrespect to Emily at all, but I think Scott's going to do enough. I don't think it's going to be. I think it'll be tight, but I think he's going to win it.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think I can say anything else to that really. So the candidates on the ballot this year for the Hillsey voters: Mariam Daniel for the Labour Party, Emma Murphy for the Greens, Scott Pater Harris for the Conservatives, Emily Strudwick for Portsmouth Independence Party, and Peter Williams for the Liberal Democrats.
It's taking us to our top four.
Mm.
So I'll change my numbering system just to fit in with yours now. So at 4.
Ah, you conformist.
So
I just can't get my head to work it. I'm sorry.
so when we've agreed on all 10 so far in terms of the outcome, so here's where things could become divergent. So at number 4, I've got Eastney and Craneswater.
Oh, interesting. So my number 4 is Baffins.
Oh, that's my number 2. Right. Shall I give you my view on Eastney and Craneswater?
You go for it.
Now, I think it's one of those kind of wards where it is all over the shop, and it's had Lib Dems, it's had Conservatives. There's been quite a strong Labour resurgence in the last couple of years. Votes tend to swim around a bit in Eastney and Craneswater, and this is another one where we see the incumbent stepping down. Now, Linda Symes won it with 35% of the vote back in 2019, but I think since then it's become a bit more of a kind of an open race. And so much as it pains me, I've got Eastney and Craneswater down as a Lib Dem gain.
Interesting. So have I. So I think, I think actually. So last year we had the folks in Eastney and Craneswater returned Matthew Winnington again, who had been ousted the year before by John Smith from the Conservatives. But I think that was more about so there was a bit of a national kind of resurgence. This was kind of the vaccine euphoria kind of time. So it was a very good time for the Conservative vote, to be honest. But there was also a very strong Labour campaign in the ward that year, and I think the tussle for second, for basically between Labour and the Liberal Democrats, allowed the Conservative candidate to kind of win through. Last year that didn't happen. It was a different year for the Conservatives, I think, nationally.
And locally,
Where
it
yeah,
was a very hard night for
yeah,
us.
yeah, it was a very hard night for the Conservatives. But just kind of seeing on that trend, I don't think there's going to be a resurgence much in their vote this year. And I think although this was one again where we had a good hustings with a good slew of candidates, and our first Reform UK candidate actually taking part in one of our hustings. So yeah, I think it's going to be a tight one actually between Labour and the Liberal Democrats, but I do feel that I'm reasonably confident that the Liberal Democrats are actually going to take that award back.
And it's interesting because you've got it you've got it as a Lib Dem fight. I've actually got it as a Lib Dem Conservative fight, and I think
Oh.
I think it's going to be quite tight. I don't think the Conservatives will do anywhere near as badly as they did last year. I don't see a resurgence back up to the kind of 2 years ago, but I
Mhm.
don't think it will be as bad as last year. So I'm going Lib Dem hold, but I'm or Lib Dem gain, but I'm putting that down at less than 5%.
Oh, okay. Oh, I haven't got that specific.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So the candidates vying for your votes in Eastleigh and Craneswater, again, go and have a listen or a watch of our hustings for Eastleigh and Craneswater. If you'd like to hear what what have I done there? Sorry, Peter Cadlish, I've deleted your first name instead of your middle name from the copy and paste job I did from the notice of electors. So the Liberal Democrat candidate is in fact Peter Cadlish, not Gordon Cadlish, as I've got on the screen at the moment. The Portsmouth Independents candidate is Jenny Dobson. We've got Stephen Gories for the Conservative Party, Tamara Groen for the Greens, Jane Shepherd for Labour, and Mark Zimmer for Reform UK. So so we had Peter, Stephen, Jane, and Mark all join us in our hustings the Sunday before last. I think that was our first one with 4 candidates this year. So
Was
it
indeed.
was it was indeed a busy hustings. So do go along and have a listen or a look at that.
So I had Baffins as my second closest. You had it as third closest. Do you want to talk to me about Baffins?
Okay. If you insist. So Baffins. So another ward where a sitting councillor's standing down. So that's Lynn Stagg from the Liberal Democrats. So their candidate this year, Leonie Oliver, is trying to step into her shoes. And I'm just trying to get the stats back up. So we had a hustings there where we had the Conservative candidate, and and to be fair, Joe made a good presence on the hustings on that one. Sorry, someone's just frozen my end, so I couldn't get
No worries.
the Baffins
And and
numbers up. I've got them now.
yep. And
Sorry, go on.
Paul Oakley-Cleef gave a very good
Yes.
account of himself as the PIP candidate, and I think
Mhm.
Paul was second last year, wasn't he? In terms of he narrowly edged ahead of the Conservative candidate last year. And it's strange, isn't it, that we're talking about Baffins as being, it's in our top 3 of closest wards because, if we look back at 2019, Lynn Stagg won it with 45% of the vote. So that would have been considered pretty much a cast iron seat going forward. But Baffins, I think, has been one for those of us that love to study the political runes. Is a little bit. It's one that we spend a lot of time sort of trying to understand it, and I'm not sure we ever quite get there.
Um, Perhaps, but it's there's there's a strong community feel
Mm.
in wards like Baffins, and indeed the people there take just before people don't at me. I'm not saying that other people don't, but they take a great deal of pride. They've got obviously some good community facilities within the ward. I think I think it's going to be a tighter battle between the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats than's been had in previous years. So I think, if anything, Baffins will probably buck the trend, I think, for what will happen to the Conservative vote across the city. But I do still see that as a Lib Dem win. Oh, sorry, as a Lib Dem return. Okay, hold. Bleh.
First one we've disagreed on. I
Oh, what did you say it was going to be?
I didn't say. I hadn't said as
Oh,
yet. No,
oh,
no. I'd said I thought it was going to be tight. But I've got it down as a Kong game.
oh, okay. I can see how I could be wrong on that one, and as I've said, I think it's going to be a close run thing.
There is a
But
yeah. No,
yeah,
and to be fair, the form guide would say that you've picked the favourite, and I think no one could argue against a Lib Dem hold. But there is a piece of me that has always thought that Baffins should be. I've got nothing more to go on other than a feeling should be a Conservative. It should be a Conservative stronghold. I think we got a really strong candidate in there this year. He's been very active, and I'm saying we're going to sneak it. So it brings us down to our
okay.
final two that we think are going to be proper close.
Shall I just read out the
Yeah,
candidates
yeah,
for
yeah.
Baffins?
Let's do that.
That's an interesting observation, though. I don't entirely disagree with you seeing that. I can see what you're saying there about the strength of the Conservative candidate. I'm just kind of looking at, over the last 7 years, they've returned a Liberal Democrat councillor
Yeah,
for six, and last year with a nearly 20% point lead advantage. So I just, yeah, I don't see it. Well, let's see. We'll see tomorrow night, and our listeners and viewers can follow along and see which of us were wrong. And which of us were right. We might both be wrong. Who knows? So the candidates on the ballot for Baffins are Mark Farwell for the Labour Party, Paul Oakley-Cleef for Portsmouth Independents, Leonie Oliver for Liberal Democrats, Bob Simmons for the Greens, and Joe Standen for the Conservative Party.
so that leaves us Central Southsea
Mm-hmm.
and Milton. Now, I've got Central Southsea as Milton's my closest. Shall we cover Central Southsea first?
Yeah. Okay. I've got it in the same order as well.
Perfect. So Central Southsea, Susie Horton, the incumbent,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
friend of the pod,
Mm-hmm.
universally kind of acknowledged as a generally fine individual and good egg by most. But all my word, hasn't Central Southsea been a battleground over recent years?
Yes, it's certainly been, I think, a key target ward for the local Labour Party. They've certainly made it an area that they've put lots of campaign effort into in order to return Charlotte Gerarda the year before last.
And I think
Yeah,
it'd be
it's a
fair to
strong
say
one.
that was the shock of 2 years ago.
Mm.
Steve Pitt, I think pretty much everyone acknowledged that he had worked his buttocks off over the pandemic, deputy leader of the council, and the cruel mistress that is politics then saw him out on those same buttocks, and Charlotte Gerarda returned for Labour. So, yes. And last year,
So last year it was a quite a convincing Labour win. To be fair, so yeah, it was a tight one thing in 2021, but yeah, last year was there's what a sizable gap there. So I think if you look at the trend of the vote over time, there's been a bit of a fight backwards and forwards. It was from 2014, it's been Liberal Democrat, Liberal Democrat, Liberal Democrat, Labour, Liberal Democrat, Labour, Labour. Um, so um,
So the,
yeah, I think it's a very, very close one, and I find it really hard to call. But we discussed beforehand that you were going to force me to.
yeah,
So
I think we're going to have to. And the smart money here
mhm.
would predict a Labour gain, but there's a part of me that can't do it. I can't call it. I think at the end of, I think Susie's very much a fighter, and I think there is an element of she does work really hard for for a constituency and for the city as a whole. And there's a my statistically leaning brain says Labour will probably snatch it, but there's a part of me that still works in the world of natural justice, and I'm going for a wish she wasn't a Lib Dem, but a Susie Horton Holt.
What? Hang on. You went really kind of like you went really around there. I didn't know. I thought you were wow. Okay,
Yep.
I thought you were going the other way on that one. I'm honestly really struggling to call it. If I just look at the bar chart of what's there, and that's a liberal, it's a you know
I
you
mean,
can see that the Labour Labour vote share over time has been increasing. So I if I was going on that, I'd say that that would be a narrow Labour gain.
yep. So, and to be fair, it's a let's be honest, neither of us has a vote in Central South Sea, so we can't influence it one
No,
way or the other. And as I
no,
say, the statistician's choice would be the Labour gain. And with your cool analytical head, that's the way you've gone.
I don't
Um,
always like what the cool analytical head tells
no,
me,
no, no,
um,
no.
but but that's the that's the way of it. But again, that's another good hustings to go listen to watch. So we had Susie and so Joshua Allen, the Labour Party candidate, were were taking part in the hustings. Unfortunately, the PIP candidate Lee Tyndall had to pull out because he was taken poorly shortly before we did them. So yeah, and Menno Groen, the Green candidate, and Alicia Denny, the Conservative candidate. But yeah, do go listen to
Well,
and watch the hustings.
yeah. So there is an element of look, we provide these as a noble service as well as keeping us out of trouble and off the streets. So if you are wavering as to which way you should go tomorrow and between Labour and the Lib Dems in Central South Sea, go and have a listen to the hustings and make your decision based on what you hear. Which leaves us inevitably to the one where we think, oh, it's going to be tight. We're in Milton.
Yes. So yeah, it's gonna be a tough one this year. I think for Milton, for several reasons. I think it's just the confluence uh, of what's happening in the local political. So again, another strong kind of community focused area. It's one of the key wards that would be impacted by the proposed Aquin project if that gets to go ahead. And that's been a kind of a strong element to the campaign element of. Well, to be fair, it's not exactly something that political parties or indeed any candidates across the city have disagreed about, but it's been kind of like a strong thing kind of going on in the ward. But yeah, so the existing Labour group, sorry, I beg your pardon, the existing Liberal Democrat group leader Gerald Vernon Jackson is up for re-election. And last year it was a narrow win, returning Steve Pitt back to the council.
35 votes over Paul, I think, or 34. It was a handful, and yeah, if you look at it back in 2019 when Gerald was returned, you know, he had a very, very, very chunky share of the vote, 41% back then, and it got to the point last year where it was a handful of votes. And again, this will be one where I can feel your heart and your head in conflict here, Simon. I think there's, I think this year a bit of anti-establishment thing going on. I think that this is the ward that I think Labour have poured an awful lot of resource into, and it was part of my thinking around Central South Sea as to why I think I gave Susie the nod. I think Labour are really pouring everything they can into into Milton, and I think with Paula Ann Savage's work with Aquin, I think that's going to be enough to get her over the line.
Yes, I really these last two I really struggled with,
Yep.
hence their place on my list of. But if I look at the numbers and I look at kind of what I'm seeing on the ground, and we have to be clear. Neither of us has access to secret behind the scenes
Nope.
data or information from any political party. No one's sharing with us any polling information or any canvassing information. We are just doing this on what we're seeing. We're using past results as some sort of guide of future results, which isn't necessarily always accurate.
Nope.
Yeah, I do see that as a Labour win.
So we've agreed on 12 out of the 14 wards. The only two that we differ on are Baffins, where you're suggesting a Lib Dem hold and I'm suggesting con gain, and Central Southsea, where I'm suggesting a Lib Dem hold and you're suggesting a Labour gain. Well, good Lord, we've never been so aligned. Is this the new consensus politics they talked about? Who knows? So I think based on, to be fair, the difference between, ultimately, I think in terms of if we have got it right, there's every chance we've got some of these things hideously wrong.
Indeed.
But
and some I really hope I have.
Well, yes, indeed, and again, there is an element of, as we sit there tomorrow or actually the day after tomorrow at about 3 o'clock in the morning, as we're coiling
Hang
up
on.
all the wires.
Well, the council said that they expect the first declaration to be about midnight and the last to be about 2:30. So that's kind of rapid going.
Yeah.
The interesting thing for me will be as to which ward ends up being called first and which ward ends up being called last. I reckon Drayton and Farlington will be the first one to be called, and the last one to be called will be Milton.
I think we agree on Milton. I think I'm hoping not, but I think the first one to be called will be Charles Dickens, because the number of votes to be counted are not usually as many as you'd hope. And I think that will be a function of tomorrow. I think turnout is going to be down. I think we'll be back in no overall control, but I think the key thing is that whatever happens tomorrow, we will be there for every twist and turn, like a twisty-turny thing.
Yes, indeed, like a twisty-turny thing. In your predictions, the council. So currently, there's 17 Liberal Democrat councillors, 13 Conservative, 8 Labour. No, I tried this at the beginning and couldn't make the numbers well up, so I'm not going to repeat my stupidity. But the car, So interestingly, both of us end up with the same number of Liberal Democrats.
Yes.
And a slightly different number of Conservatives and a slightly different number of Labour Labour councillors. So who knows? At the end of the day, it is for the voters to decide. And if you are one of those, and you are not voting by post, then you will need to remember to take voter ID with you tomorrow. Tomorrow being the first time in a England-wide poll that you will need to take photo ID. You can find some details of that. I'm going to put into the top of the left-hand side of the screen a QR code where you can go to the Electoral Commission's website to get details of the ID that you can find, that you can use, things like a driving license, a passport, proof of age card, certain local travel cards, and other government issued documents. But at the polling station, when you would normally go up to the person and say, I am such and such and they'll ask you to confirm your address, or you'd hand over your polling card if you remember to take it with you. You don't have to take your polling card with you, but they'll ask you for the same thing, and they'll also ask you for photo ID. There might also in some polling stations be someone on the door asking you whether you've got photo ID to kind of remind you, rather than kind of causing a queue later in the station. But do remember, in the trial in Gosport in 2018, about 45% of the people that were turned away without ID didn't actually come back and vote. So do set a reminder on your phone,
Go
put a post-it
Arms.
on the back of your door, put it into your coat or put it into your bag to make sure that you've got it with you. But do make sure that you've got your photo ID with you so that you can be able to vote tomorrow. Polls open from 7 a.m. and close at 10 p.m. If you are in the queue to vote at 10 p.m., you are entitled to still vote past 10 p.m. So if you're in the queue waiting to get in at 10 p.m., stay in the queue if you want to vote, because they
Absolutely.
will be allowed to vote. Yeah, that's kind of the thing there. So
On that
yeah.
administrative bombshell, we shall be turning up all armed with ID tomorrow. You've been listening
Mm.
to the Pompey Politics Podcast. I've been Ian Tiny Morris.
I've been Simon Sansbury, and thank you very much for watching. But yeah, do follow us on our Facebook page or on Twitter, or subscribe to us on YouTube, or click to say that you're interested in the event for the live stream tomorrow, to make sure you get notifications when we go live. But we'll see you tomorrow evening, and do remember to cast your vote. It's your vote, your voice. Don't lose it. It's your Simon Sansbury. It feels weird without any guests or any hustings
No,
participants
no, no.
to
So,
say I've been here as well.
yeah,
Um,
no. There's been my cat, but that doesn't really count. Right,
no,
time to get rested, ready for tomorrow. Onward and upward.
yeah, time to get some sleep, I think.